In the following tutorial, we're going to take a look at button libraries. Let's create a new ActionScript3 file and save it as button libraries. And I already have one, so I'm going to replace it. And we're going to be looking at two basic button libraries. First off, we have our button libraries, which is a common library of buttons that every Flash install has. And you'll see that we have a number of different libraries here. There's a lot of different buttons. There are button assets, button bars, lots of different ones. And if you want to use one, just click and drag it out, and we will now have a copy of that button on the stage. You might want to go ahead and test your scene just to make sure things are working. The reason why is because I've noticed occasionally we run into ones that cause some problems. And so we'll be showing that a little bit later in this tutorial. Anyway, there are lots of different looks here to work with. There's another one. There are different colors in that style, and we might get some ones that are rounded. That's a little bit more that Web 2.0 button style. Might zoom in just a little bit just so I can see these a little bit larger. And we also have some that are like classic buttons that have ones like arcade buttons. Those are kind of nice. A little bit large, but they're nice. And then we have knobs and faders even. Here might be some knobs. Here's a fader button, a fader knob button. So here's what that fader button might look like. It's pretty large, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Let's see, pan details. Here's an input box gain fader, pan knob, pan shadow. You'll see that not everything here is going to be a button. Here are some buttons that are playback buttons. They kind of look old school. Here's some push buttons. Those are kind of fun. Could be used on an interface pretty well. They even have a drop shadow that's applied to them. And then you'll see these playback flat buttons that I use a fair amount for like rewind, fast forward, pause, play, and stop. I'll use those in some later tutorials. Anyway, in order to edit one of these, we're going to go into one of the buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and close my button library and just test my screen real quick just to make sure everything is rendering. And I'll save my file as well. And we're going to change the text inside our buttons. So I'm going to double click on one of my buttons and look at the structure that's inside here. Like in the examples that we created before, we have text which is on its own layer, and then I have all my different background elements on the different layers. And I even have a hit state here. In order to edit the text, I'm going to zoom up a little bit, and I'm going to adjust the left of that text to be on the left-hand side of my graphic, and the right-hand side of the text to be on the right-hand side. Now, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it is nice when it is perfect. I'm going to try and get just a little bit closer so I can get that perfect. There we go. Now, like before, I have the text set to paragraph in the center. That's why that text is appearing in the center of this object. Oh, there you go. You'll notice, once again, for some reason, that box has adjusted its size a little bit. One of the reasons it might be adjusting is because I have the anti-alias set to bitmap. I don't know why, but that's the way that they have the text when you use these libraries. So I'm going to set this back to readability. And I might adjust this just a little bit more. Oops, I need to double click on it until I get back to it and adjust that back a little bit. That looks better. It's maybe not absolutely perfect, but it's good enough. Anyway, I can change the font as needed. And then I can use my up and down arrows to place this text the way I want it. Now, when I go back to my scene, you'll notice that I do have altered text. Now, of course, if I want to name this text what I want, I can select the text and change it however. So I might say, visit us now. So this will be a button that I use for going to a website. And I'm going to go back to scene 1 and zoom out a little bit with Control minus and just test that movie. So you'll see that I do have that button there. and I'm able to use the button library to create a new custom button. Now let's take a look at an example that's a little bit more advanced, like this push button. Double click on the push button and go inside of it, and you'll see there are more layers to deal with. There's quite a lot of layers here. And so it can be somewhat confusing to work with a button that is this complex. You'll see there's a lot of stuff here. So I'm going to go back to scene 1. Just take a look at the push button. Here's another series of layers. They even have some of them hidden. But that particular button has a down effect that's happening there. So there's a lot going on with even a graphic that looks pretty simple, but you can of course have things that are even more simple than this. Notice that the hit state is just a simple graphic and does not include this drop shadow. It's just the area that is going to be clickable for that particular button, which is actually even smaller than the button itself. So if you wanted to get in here and change things like the colors here, it may be kind of difficult. It's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. We may have to figure out what layer has the colors. So not that layer. Let's see, that layer 4 seems to have some color to it. So look at that. I can change the color by changing that particular layer. So it'll take a little bit of getting used to trying to navigate all the layers in button libraries. Of course, what's easier is just to create your own buttons. So I'd like you to play around with adjusting some colors and adding different text, changing the font on text on a few different buttons, at least 5 different button libraries. And the last button that I want to show you is the component button. So let's go to the components. And the button that we're looking for is this user interface button. So I'm going to click and drag that out, copy that out, and I can close the component window. Let's save our file and then try Control Enter. Now the reason that we're trying Control Enter is that even though this component button is great, sometimes it causes some issues. So we just want to be aware of that. Now I'm going to go to the window menu and bring up the component inspector, which I already have somewhere here. And this is what the component inspector looks like. One of the things that you're going to be looking for with this component inspector is the ability to change the label. And so I can call this sample button, and you'll see when I change the label, it changes that text. Now one of the cool things about the component button is that I can change the shape of this button or scale it up, and it will keep this text exactly the same size. Another thing about this button is you'll notice by default it actually has transparency. So whatever color it is behind, if I were to create maybe a background element and put this in the background with Control Shift and down arrow, because that is something else, you'll see that that's a drawing object. That's why it went on top. Anyway, you'll see that this button actually is on top of it, and that opacity is something that we have to control somewhere else. Anyway, you'll see this component button a lot of times in my files, and I want to show you it is possible to change the look. If you double click on it, we get into this crazy example of all the different states of that button, and each of these states is an individual movie clip. Now we could actually change our different settings here, possibly changing our tint, or we could double click and go inside the physical movie clip itself and change things about it. That's kind of a lot to do, but it is possible. So anyway, I'm going to go back and test this movie, and you'll see now when I click on it, I do have a different look. Let's see, I'm getting a blue somewhere, so I'm going to try and find that selected down, and I want to change this state so that I have that tint. Maybe I'll do the advanced. That way I can kind of get a different look. Maybe it'll kind of go yellow. Go back to scene 1, do Control Enter, and you'll see, oh, it's not wanting to use that yellow. So it's possible that it doesn't like the effects. I may have to go all the way inside that and adjust the colors there. That's kind of a good thing to know, I guess. I've never really dealt with changing the colors. But let me try Control Enter, and now I just have to make sure I have the right one, don't I? That's probably the down state. So let's go into the down state and see if we can change the colors there. So here's our original color. There's another one. Go back to scene 1, test my movie. And there we go. Now we have indeed changed the look of that button. So I'd like you to alter your component button just a little bit just to show that you can. And then you can save your work and we are done with button libraries. Of course, you can probably find other button libraries online somewhere or make your own button libraries, which is even cooler. And that's the end of this tutorial.